So, okay, yeah, it should be recording now. So I'm back with Tom the Critic, and we already talked about Starship Troopers, and we also wanted to talk about Alien and The Exorcist, because those are also movies that have some very deep symbolism in it. And I love to talk with you about those aspects. And I already know we have some different interpretations. So I think we can just share our interpretations of those movies. Those are very iconic movies.
Mhm. You want me to go first, or
Well, I can go. I can straight away tell you what my interpretation of it is now, if you want, or you can go first. Whatever you want.
yeah, you could go ahead.
I already told you that because when we talked about Starship Troopers, we had to talk about some serious aspects of it, because obviously it's about war, and it's about fascism.
Mhm.
It's and a lot of people don't get it. It's not promoting fascism. It's
It's a takedown of it.
fun of fascism. And it's the same with a lot of Paul Verhoeven movies. We also talked about Showgirls. You know, they, they they have some very deep meaning in it, even though it doesn't appear to be that way. And it's the same. It's the same with Alien and The Exorcist. A lot of people just think, oh, those are stupid horror movies, blah blah blah, but they have some very deep symbolism in it, and I think it's actually the same symbolism. I can, well, we have to address it. It's some very dark symbolism, actually. Um, the way I see it, it's about rape.
Mm. Um, I could see that for both of the films, especially because I think because the thing with possessions, like in the exorcism, they usually happen to broken people or people who've lost their faith. And of course, there's no such thing as being possessed, but when you look at how it's written, like tales and stories of possessions, and I do think that what caused her to be broken was that she got sexually assaulted by the movie guy, the director in the film. And I think that's what caused the possession to happen.
Burke.
Oh, I didn't get that.
That's his name. Burke.
Yes, yes, yeah. And I and then what you like rewatching the film, you know how I mean, it's interesting to see how sexual each of the actions by the possessed girl are. Like the kind of stabbing herself with the cross and all that, and the language that she uses.
Yeah, see, so you noticed it.
Mm.
Yet still you're saying that, because when we talked before, you were
Mm.
saying that you see you were saying that you're not religious, and you see the Exorcist as being too religious.
Oh no, I didn't say it was too religious. I said it's a very religious film, which I really love. Even though I'm not religious, I love like a well done religious film, and I think The Exorcist is a religious film that's well done. I think the primary focus of the film is to explore a man who's lost faith and who regains his faith, and I think typically that isn't done well in movies, but I think The Exorcist nails it.
Right, the Exorcist does have religious aspects. You can't deny that.
Mm.
Um, but the way I see it, that's one way of looking at it, right? You can say, oh, she's possessed. Or
Mhm.
you can say, well, she has obviously been abused, and she she has suffered sexual abuse, and that's why she's behaving that way. So it's the same thing. It's just two different ways of looking at it, and you can. you can see that in the in the sequel. Well, the same again. It's the same with Starship Troopers. To say the first sequel, The Exorcist 2, oh, horrible, horrible.
I
But
haven't seen it.
the third one, Exorcist Legion. I think you're right. It's Legion. The third sequel is great, and I think it also explains a bit about the first one, um, because why is the third movie called Legion? It's referencing the Bible, of course, and there's this part in the Bible where Jesus uh, where Jesus is brought to a possessed person, and he asks the possessed person, "What is your name?" And the possessed person answers, "Legion, Legion, Legion, for we are many." Right. So so that's so it's what I'm trying to get at is today we wouldn't say that this person is possessed. We would say if this person, if this person has many people living in him, then by today's standards, we wouldn't say he's possessed. We would say he has multiple personality disorder. But back then, people would say, well, if he has many people living in him, obviously he's possessed, right? So but what I'm trying to get at is it's the same thing. It's just two different ways of looking at the same thing. And it's it's the same with Vegan in The Exorcist. You can you can look at her as a psychologist, and you would think, obviously, she has suffered abuse, and there's a lot of hints to that. If you rewatch the movie, and you already noticed that, there's a lot of hints to that movie director character Burke sexually abusing her. So that's definitely there, that aspect. So that's one aspect of looking at it, and that aspect of looking at it is totally valid. And then you could, of course, also look at it, from a religious aspect, and then you would come to the conclusion that she's possessed.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that's kind of a quality you see with William Friedkin's work, the director of The Exorcist. If you watch a lot of his filmography, you'll notice that there's a lot of ambiguity in stuff that typical movies, there wouldn't be any ambiguity. So for me, in The Exorcist, I think it's very clear that she's possessed, but the rape being the cause of her possession, and I think the director puts a lot of misdirections in it, even because after we've seen all the supernatural and stuff, people are still denying that she's possessed. But that's just what William Friedkin does. If you, have you seen his movie, The Cruising? I mean, Cruising.
No, I know there's one movie he did that was basically his sequel to The Exorcist. It's not an official sequel to The Exorcist, but
Or are you talking about the documentary?
no, 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 no. Didn't he? He made a movie very similar to The Exorcist, but with a different message. Was basically his sequel to The Exorcist, but I forgot what it was called because it wasn't called The Exorcist. It's not an official sequel.
Hmm. Well, going back to William Friedkin, I think a lot when you watch the film, he drops hints at a plausible explanation for stuff happening. Like the stuff going on in the attic. Oh, that was just rats. Oh, like the bed shaking. Maybe she was just like being very having like a seizure or like just fucking moving her body violently, and the different personality. Of course, you can have like mental disorders and stuff, but I think I really like how he does that, because even though to me it's clear that she was actually possessed, because what happens at the end where the possession gets passed on, and then the priest kills himself. I think that's like the defining, okay, possessed. There's no doubt about it. Her floating up, but I like how he sprinkles in doubt everywhere, because that's something I really. He's one of my favorite directors. If you watch his movie Cruising, there's the whole point of the movie is there's a killer, and you'll know who the killer is. And with each appearance of the killer, he has a different height, he has a different build, and he has a different like voice inflection and like pattern of speech. And the whole point of it is to say that there's not one killer, but there's many killers targeting this community.
That's interesting. That's very interesting. I didn't know that, but it makes a lot of sense because they actually did the same thing in Exorcist 3 in Legion. Because yes, they in Exorcist Legion they're picking up where the first movie left off. They're obviously ignoring the second movie because it was garbage. Thankfully they're ignoring the second movie. And yes, they have the priest that sacrificed himself. So the younger priest, not the older one played by
Max von. I don't know how to pronounce his last name. So he's passed away recently. And,
love him. Love all of his movies. Great. And he tends to play religious characters for some reason. You know, he tends to play the devil, but he also played Jesus and stuff like that.
What I love about his character in the movie is because he's a very nice contrast to the younger priest. Well, his first appearance, he's absolute certain in his faith. It's unwilling that he believes in God. He knows what he has to do. He knows he has to save this child. He comes in, and he doesn't even wants to know the details of the case. He just knows that he has to perform an exorcism. And I think that provides a nice contrast to the other priest who's like shaken in his faith. And I think watching them interact is very, very good. And I think overall, I think this film is a masterpiece. You know, watching it as a kid, I didn't pick up at a lot of the earlier moments of the foreshadowing and the very good filmmaking going on and the sound design. But like rewatching it recently, I have to just say it's like one of my favorite movies now. And which is surprising, I never got around to rewatching it because William Friedkin is one of my favorite directors.
But getting back to what I wanted to say, in the third movie, it picks off with what's his character? Do you remember the name of his character or the name of the actor? The younger priest.
Let's see.
The younger priest that sacrificed himself. Anyway, it doesn't matter. It focuses on him. In the third movie, he sort of survived, but of course the reason he survived is because he's possessed now, and he's actually played by two actors, which I think it's very interesting, because you mentioned that in the other movie you had the killer being played by different actors, and it's the same in Exorcist 3, where the killer is again being played by different actors, because he's the killer now, because he's now possessed and he's evil. He does a lot of evil things, and he's played by the same actor that played him in The Exorcist, but he's also played by Brad Dourif, and it's very interesting. It's he's sitting there in his cell, and he's talking. And then when he becomes angry, basically when he becomes the possession, he turns into Brad Dourif, and he's played by Brad Dourif, who played Chucky.
That's really interesting, because I just naturally assume that, because I haven't watched any of the older sequels. I've watched all the modern interpretation. I mean, not interpretation, but remakes of The Exorcist and all that. Most of them are like fairly discardable, but I've never watched the direct sequels to The Exorcist, just because I just naturally assumed that all the characters from the first film aren't going to be in it. And
if you want the characters from the first film, if you want even all the characters basically from the first film, you got to watch Exorcist 2: The Heretic. It's the worst movie ever, though. Oh God, it's so bad.
I mean, with the exception, I think this is a nice segue. With the exception of a few films, one of which being Alien, they rarely have a good sequel.
Well, the the direct sequel, Exorcist 2, yes, that was very bad. But the third movie, that's what I was trying to say. The third movie is actually pretty good. Same as with Starship Troopers that we talked about. Okay, the third Starship Troopers isn't great, but it's watchable. You
It's
know,
watchable.
and so the direct sequel of Starship Troopers, but the third film they that was pretty good. And it's the same with The Exorcist. Exorcist 2, ooh. Exorcist 3, pretty good.
Didn't Paul Schrader have something to do with the sequel?
Um, uh, I,
Or am I?
I,
Or
you're talking about Exorcist 2, the Heretic. I tried to watch it. I tried to watch it several times. I never made it through. And I watched The Room. And,
I mean,
I
I
love
mean,
that movies, but the direct sequel, Exorcist 2, it's just oh dear.
yeah, with Paul Schrader, he tends his batting average is really really bad. Half of his movies are, well, I wouldn't even say a quarter of his movies are phenomenal, but the rest are really really bad, really really bad.
Um. So yeah, so I guess we covered the symbolism in Exorcist, but yes, I think it's the same symbolism in Ale, um, and I actually picked up on that even when I watched it as a child, because when I was a child I was actually abused. Um, So I didn't notice it. Of course, I didn't notice it consciously, but subconsciously, I noticed that the abuse seems in Alien, and actually, it was very scary. I watched it when I was 4 years old, and I had nightmares for many weeks afterwards. Um, but on the other hand, it also gave me courage because even though, of course, at that time I didn't notice it consciously, but I noticed the seams subconsciously, and I also at least subconsciously noticed that you know uh, uh, because we talked about the Exorcist. Now I just no Ripley, not Wagon, Ripley.
Mm.
Ripley. Ripley survives all that, all the horrible things. So that also gave me hope. That was like, okay, well, if she can survive her abuse or
Mm.
her abused, and there were a lot of abuse scenes in Alien, then I can survive as well.
Yeah, that just speaks to, the power of cinema and how we consume it, because no matter like what film you watch, it's always going to be your interpretation of everything, regardless if the director has a clear intent. I think it was Quentin Tarantino that says, whatever the public decides a movie to like its themes to be, that's what it becomes. And I think that's sort of true in the mind of the viewer, because one of my worst videos that I've ever done was Pan's Labyrinth, and that's just because when I wrote the video on it, I had like a jaded view of the world, and I still do. And so my interpretation was, you know, incorrect. But I think, yeah, your interpretation of it, I think it's valid in the sense where there's a lot of design, because you know who did the designs for the creatures and the that
Geiger.
what, I didn't hear you.
Geiger.
Yeah, brilliant artist.
Right. No, no. Is it German? Well, German speaking. German speaking,
I,
definitely.
I think he's Swedish. I think.
No, well, he might. I'm not sure about his nationality. His nationality might not be German, but he's definitely German speaking.
Yeah. And then if you view a lot of his artwork, it's very sexual. I forgot what he calls his art, but
Necronomicon. That
yes,
that was the book that inspired Alien.
yeah. I think that's very apparent because if you look at the environmental design, a lot of hallways look like vaginas. You know, the design of the alien. And what I think happened was I think the director got together with H.R. Geiger and said, you know, this is the concept for the creature. This is what's going to happen in the screenplay. And H.R. Geiger is like, oh, this is very innately sexual. So he made a creature design that reflected that. And, you know, the xenomorph, of course, his head, the whole concept of the implanting a parasite in somebody that without their will can consent to, and you know, that gestating and the possibility of that could kill you. It's a very interesting parallel between his designs, and because it's very intentional, I think the designs were very intentional in that sense. And I think it was one of those things where it's like the perfect marriage between a designer and a director and his story.
Yeah, yeah, a lot of right in Alien, a lot of the symbolism, especially a lot of the symbolism about rape, is in the designs. But well, it's also in the actions of the characters, but
Mm-hmm.
mainly in the designs. It becomes very obvious. Yes.
Mm-hmm. And then especially the interactions and how the xenomorph kind of like kills them, and not in terms of, you know, the imagery, but like how he where his face is compared to the actors' bodies. It's very sexual how it's framed, and of course, you know, the ending with Ripley walking around, you know, in her undies, and the alien just popping out of nowhere. I think that's all of it's very intentional, but I think I sometimes wonder because, you know, modern movies, they're very unsexual. They have like very little sexual imagery. You rarely see a sex scene in movies nowadays. I wonder how much of my interpretation is just, wow, this is very sexual, but just because modern movies that I've been watching, they're completely devoid of sex. So by direct comparison, Alien seems inherently sexual.
Well, it's it's not sexual in the sense, with other movies. I wouldn't say sexual. It's because it's not sexual in any pleasant way at all.
Yeah, it's not romantic at all.
It is sexual, but in a very, very, very unpleasant way.
Hmm.
So it really is about rape. And even though, and that's what makes it scary, is because people pick up on that. It's very obvious. The symbolism is all over the place. So, but because it's of course symbolic, some people might not pick up on that consciously, but they do pick up on it subconsciously, which is why the movie is so scary. That's what makes it scary. Precisely when you're not able to pick up on it consciously, but only subconsciously, then that makes you very scared, because subconsciously you realize, okay, it's about rape and it's very unpleasant, it's not nice, but you don't realize it consciously. So you just have that very uneasy feeling the entire time you're watching that movie, and you don't quite know why you feel so uneasy, because you're not necessarily picking up on it consciously, but you definitely are picking up on it, and it makes you feel very uneasy, and that's why it's such a successful horror movie.
Yeah, I think everyone picks up on the body horror element to it. You know, the whole concept of having something like bust out of your stomach or like something implanted into you is very inherently creepy. You know, I think that's I wish we had like a resurgence of this type of body horror
Yeah,
because
they don't make good movies anymore. I don't
I
think
mean
they do.
here's my thoughts on the current state of film. I think they're making more great movies than they've ever made, but they're also making more terrible movies that they've ever made, and it's just that you have to find those. I still think the peak of cinema was probably around the early 70s, late 60s. I think that was a peak, but I still think there are great films being made. It's just that they're really harder to find, and they don't really tend to get much traction outside of film Twitter and all that.
Right, right. Of course, you're right. They still do make good movies. They do, but yeah, it's just yeah, right. It's become much harder to find them. Right.
Yeah, I think, and because this is going off on a bit of a tangent, but what I hate about most filmmakers nowadays is they're so obsessed in showing like how good they are at filmmaking in terms of like doing these like elaborate set pieces and stuff where it's like long tracking shots. But like William Friedkin said this, he said film directors now they could do anything with their camera, but they say nothing. I think that's very inherent when you see a film like an old school great director like Martin Scorsese, when he comes out with a film like The Irishman, and you just see the intense gap in quality between him and modern day directors.
Um, a movie from the 70s that I very much like, and it's a great movie, but it's also fallen under the radar, and it's also sort of a sequel to The Exorcist. It's Sorcerer. Sorcerer.
You talk William Friedkin?
Is it from William Friedkin?
No. I'm thinking of a different one. I'm thinking of the remake of Wages of Fear. But I think I know what you're talking about now.
But it does tie in with The Exorcist, because it has the same demon in it. It has Pazuzu in it. Pazuzu, I don't know how you pronounce that. You know that demon from The Exorcist, Pazuzu. It has the same demon basically in it, and I think that's also why it's called Sorcerer. But on the surface, it's not about demons, but the symbolism is about demons. The symbolism is very much about hell and redemption, but that's just the symbolism. That on the surface, it's about this guy in South America who's trying to deliver. Basically, he's trying to deliver himself, but no, he's trying to deliver. It's like a ton of TNT or something,
No, we are talking about the same movie. Yeah, directed by William Friedkin. It's a remake of Wages of Fear. It's a great movie.
It's a great movie, and basically the entire movie consists of him driving the truck driving the truck over bridges that are very very
shaky,
very shaky bridges. That's the main part of the movie, but it's very you'd think it might be boring, but it's very
cinematic.
Tension. There's definitely it's fascinating, and there's a lot of tension. Now think they could never remake that movie. Never. They could, but if they were to remake that movie now, it would be the worst movie. And it's such a great movie, but if they were to remake it now, it would be the worst movie ever because they would use CGI,
I mean,
that would.
Yeah, I think because that movie is a remake of. You seen the original Wages of Fear?
Oh right, that's actually a remake as well. I knew that, but I forgot about it.
Yeah, I think the modern day obsession of the use of CGI, it's kind of because I understand why people love CGIs because you get do all these complicated things that you couldn't do. You have less downtime when you're making it. And the director could just do a bunch of other stuff, doesn't have to worry about these large practical effects and whether they work or whether they have to rebuild an entire set again. But I think I wish modern blockbuster filmmakers would do that again. Because I just love practical effects. and I understand like some films can benefit from CGI. Like, have you seen Christopher Nolan's latest film on Dunkirk?
I don't watch Christopher Nolan. I don't trust him.
I mean, yeah, he's extremely overrated, but some of his films are really refined, and I really like them. And Dunkirk, you already know of the Dunkirk incident, and it's a famous war story. I mean, not a war story, but a famous event in war history. And the beaches are supposed to be packed, like person to person. You can barely walk around, but in the film, it just looks so like empty. So that's something CGI could have benefited. But yeah, I wish more films would take chances with large practical effects.
Yeah, so because that's a great example for a movie that just wouldn't work at all with CGI, and the whole reason uh, the whole reason that movie was so captivating, The Sorcerer, was precisely because you knew, there's actually a truck like that driving over a bridge like that. I mean, sure, there's
Mm.
some tricks, and it's a stunt guy and so
Mm.
on, but still, at the end of the day, uh, there's still it's they actually, it's real. It's real. They actually did
Yeah,
that. That's what makes that's why there's so much tension. If you were to do that with CGI, there would be no tension at all.
yeah. If That's partly why I love Jackie Chan movies from the '90s, where you've seen Police Story from Jackie Chan, the one he directed, where it's just he's doing these insane stunts, and you legitimately feel scared for him. But yeah,
I
of course, there's boxes and stuff.
this I no I haven't. I have to admit I haven't watched the Jackie Chan movies. No, I haven't.
Yeah, yeah. You should check out Police Story because the stuff they do in there, you
No,
you just
no.
bite your nails.
And I'm always confusing them. I'm always confusing Bruce Lee with Jackie Chan.
Mm. It's kind of a weird, confusing of two actors. It's just because Jackie Chan, his films are like so much bigger, and Bruce Lee, he did like a small run of films. Yeah, but it's yeah. And speaking to the CGI and practical effects, the first movie, uh, that's one of the faults of it. I mean, the practical effects largely still hold up, but there are certain scenes where you could tell it's like a guy in like the outfit.
Actually, when I saw the photo of the guy in the costume, the guy playing the alien,
Mm.
I was very surprised because I never thought, what? It's just a guy in a suit? I would have never guessed that.
Yeah, and the sequels to Alien, like, have you seen the rest of the series, or you've seen any of the? Yeah, so
Uh,
Alien 3 had that horrendous CGI Alien.
yeah, I saw up until Prometheus. I saw Prometheus as well, but it was whoa.
I think my ranking of the Alien movies would be Alien, Aliens, and then Prometheus, and then the rest you could just skip.
What, you like Prometheus, really?
I don't think it's on the level with Alien and Aliens. I don't think it's anywhere near them. But I do think there's some campy fun that could be had when watching those movies. And I think it has some interesting ideas in terms of I haven't seen it in a while, but like there's this like heavy religious overtone.
Yeah, but at the end, when they run, when that ship or whatever it was, when that collapses, and it's like I don't know, a few meters wide, but like 100 meters high, and that collapses, and they're running from it, and they're like, instead of just going like 5 meters to the side, they
Mm.
run 100 meters in one direction. It's just like,
I,
at that point, the movie was just ruined for me.
mm. I, I think what's more jarring to watch that movie is like the writer. He has this like obsession with not giving the answers to questions. You don't have to answer everything with a movie, but you have to at least let the viewer walk away with enough pieces of information that you could put together the coherent meaning of the overall film.
Well, what is your interpretation then of
Well,
Yes.
well, I haven't seen it in like since it came out, but which is like I think about 8 years ago. So how I remember it being, it's like the search for answers and how overall you're just gonna be let down when you try to delve into like stuff like religion and all this stuff because you end up in a roundabout. And
Right, but that makes the movie feel the same. It's the same with the movie. Then because when you watch the movie, then you have the same feeling. You have all those questions and they don't get answered, and then you just feel it's a movie because it doesn't answer the questions.
Yeah, that's the point of it. It's like it's one of those films that try to mimic, uses the feeling they give the viewer to get across its overall theme. It's trying to make you feel how the characters feel at that moment. But I think it's weighed down by its obsession with the alien iconography, where it's just like, hey, you remember this, you remember this, and I just think the series just should have ended with aliens. Even though I have some problems with aliens, I think it's still an extremely enjoyable film. James Cameron brought this bombastic sleekness to the sequel.
Aliens was great, even though thematically it was very different than the first.
It's an action movie.
Oh, we already talked about the first one, and Aliens, the second one, it was great, but it was more like a war movie,
Yeah, it was very, and you see how it's lit, how the designs have vastly changed, the amount of aliens that show up, the amount of weapons everyone has. It's pretty much an action movie from then on, where the original was a straight horror movie.
Right. It's in a different genre. It's a great movie, but it's a different genre than the first one.
Yeah, both are very enjoyable. And when rewatching, because I rewatched Alien for this video, and I was a little bit sad to see how many of the actors passed.
Oh yeah, by now, oh dear, yeah, John Hurt just passed.
Yeah, that sucks.
He basically has the same name as me when I try to give myself an English sounding name.
John Hurt.
Yeah, because that's basically my name in English.
Really?
Yeah, because okay, well, if
we're going off on a tangent.
Anyway, when I'm in America, then I just call myself John Hurt because it's easier for people to pronounce, and it sort of sounds like my actual name. And he was a great actor. He was great. But he also, the name is actually very fitting because in pretty much every movie he did, he gets hurt.
It's like the old school Sean Bean.
Okay, so I think we talked a lot and we pretty much covered everything now. So.
So, in your opinion, which of the three movies we watched, which one did you enjoy the most, and which one do you think? What would your ranking be of all three?
You mean including Starship Troopers?
Yes.
Oh, I like them all.
Yeah, I like them all too.
Well, some of the sequels obviously are a bit weaker, but that's to be expected. But generally speaking, the sequels are still watchable with a few exceptions. But when we talk about the first movie, the first Starship Troopers is great. The first Exorcist is great, and the first Alien is great. So they're all great movies setting very high standards in their respective genre. So yeah, it doesn't get much better than that. Talking about the genre, they pretty much set the standard there, you know. And of course, the standard Starship Trooper set, it's not in sci-fi or action or war movies. Obviously, Starship Troopers, you have to see it as a satire. But if you see it as a satire, it's a very good satire.
Mm. Yeah, yeah, it's one of those. Um, it's those films that kind of bring the. Are you hearing that?
Yeah, I'm listening.
Oh no, it's just I'm getting this real weird beeping on my side. Um, but anyway, if you don't hear it, then it's not a problem. Yeah, each of the films brought this respect to the genre that people still tend to not have. They kind of dismiss horror movies, which is a shame. But if you look at a lot of the modern horror movies, their pure enjoyment is based off the fact, okay, something scary is going to happen, but they have plots that are like skin deep, where it's not that deep.
Yeah, and above all, I feel that movies nowadays they don't really try to they they don't try to do anything new anymore. They're just like, oh, okay, we're just gonna copy Alien or we're just gonna
Mhm.
copy Exorcist. They don't come up with something original anymore.
Well, I think that's more of the age of the medium, and how pretty much almost everything is somewhat redundant of something else. Of course, when the movie Joker came out, everyone draw the allusions to Taxi Driver and The King of Comedy, even though it's more similar to the writing style of Paul Schrader's other work, like Winter's Light and Sleeper. Was it Sleeper? Or I forget the name of it. But yeah, of course, every film that comes out, it's going to be somewhat similar to an older film. Even films that people view as masterpieces, like First Reformed, is extremely similar to Diary of a Country Priest, and what was the other film? Winter Light. Of course, they're all going to be redundant in some way, but I think with horror films, they've seemed to be in this like juvenile state where all they're obsessed with doing is showing a scary monster and like throwing some loud noises at you. And there are some horror movies that are good, like Good Night Mommy is a very good horror movie, but I think you need to strike a balance between uh, meaning and entertainment.
Yeah, yeah. I- Okay, like I said, I think that pretty much wraps it up. Yeah, because we've already been talking for well almost 45 minutes now. So, um, yeah, I I, I, I
All
think
right.
I don't have anything to say anymore because I think we covered it all now.
Yeah. All right. It was nice talking to you. Hopefully, sometime in the future.
I appreciate it a lot, and I'm always waiting for a new video you're doing a new analysis, and always want to see, hey, do I have the same interpretation of the movie? It's always very fascinating. I'm always waiting for your new perspective on a movie.
Yeah. Well, that's glad to hear. I'm sorry about the sporadic upload schedule. It's just copyright strikes and all that.
Ah, yeah. Okay, but let's not get into that. I already talked a little about my views on YouTube.
Mm.
YouTube was great, but it still is great. We all love YouTube. YouTube is great. We love our Big Brother.
But yeah, my issue is just I don't want to get into a tangent. It's just that the media corporations that use YouTube to just copyright strike everything. YouTube has been very kind to me in terms of like being able to handle disputes between copyright holders, but I swear, especially music companies on YouTube, they will strike you if you have a second of their song in there. But anyway, I think we should probably end this discussion for a future date.
Don't get me started. Don't get me
Mm.
started. Okay, so I really appreciate it, and yeah, and YouTube is great. YouTube is great.
All right, see you later.